All right.
They're so long, and we're constantly going. Are we live? I thought you were gonna help us.
I can't. I just
Okay.
need somebody to the chat. That's yeah.
Colleen, can you name the chat? Who in here has not worked with a buyer yet, has not written a buyer contract at all? Yay, welcome. Oh, yeah, you just got your first under contract. So tell me what you felt like the hardest part was. Well, other than that, I mean, like with the buyer agent process as it is.
Actually, that's something that was very complicated, but you do have to agree each time to make sure that it is.
Yeah.
What you fill out for that.
Right. And that's how we're going to go through this a little bit, especially for the newer ones. We're not going to take a ton of time, but I want to make sure we're getting your questions answered. If you do have a buyer, you get ready to write. We want to make sure you kind of know high points, what to look for, what they're really asking. Has anybody ever done a buyer consultation where you really sit down? And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago. I just kind of want to refresh it, where you sit down and go through with the buyer, setting expectations from their end and from our end. I found that has been so important, especially if they're coming from out of state and they have no idea what they're looking for. And then even especially your first time home buyers, again, what I have found is if I get them in the office and I can pull up MLS and show them everything that I'm seeing, now they realize I'm not hiding listings. Because how many buyers said, well, I find all my houses myself, my agent never found one. Well, that's because you started looking outside the parameters you told me to look in. It never fails. You told me how to be in Clayton and you just sent me a listing in Sanford. It's like, okay, I didn't find that one. You're right. It's not where you told me you wanted to be. So I like to pull up the map on MLS and say, okay, this is where you say you want to be. What if we stretch out here? Is this too far? What if we go here? Is this too far? I know you said you didn't want to spend more than 400, but I'm going to put your search up to 425. Is it the perfect house comes 425? Are you going to want to see it? Yes. Because that's what happens. They send you listings that aren't in their parameters and they feel like we're not doing our job. One of the biggest things I want to talk about towards the end too is how important we are going to be as buyer agents moving forward. If buyers haven't figured it out by now, it's only going to get worse, in my opinion. Buyers have realized we got to have an agent that can not only get us to the house when it comes on the market, but can get us an appointment. We had one instance last year where an agent was supposed to show a Zillow lead, a listing in Garner. She shows up and that person shows up with their agent. Now they had a whole conversation and everything else. And the buyer literally said, well, my agent couldn't get an appointment and you could. So all of that to say, buyer agents are getting ready to figure out buyers are getting ready to figure out how important buyer agents are. I can't tell you how many social media posts I've seen from people in the market that were like, we've written 10 offers and can't get any accepted. You know, my agent doesn't do this, or my agent said we couldn't do this. And it's so important right now. And I know we are doing it a lot as a group, it's collaborating and figure out, hey, what's it taking to win? And in this area, in this market, and this price point, what are you seeing? Because, you know, especially in Fayetteville, it's completely different than what we're doing up here. Perry is completely different than what we're doing in Garner. And so, you know, I don't have any qualms, and hopefully y'all don't either, picking up the phone and saying, hey, I saw you just put these houses under contract. What did it take? You won. So what did it take to do that? Buyer agents that aren't connected to other agents are not giving that same level of service to their buyers. So that's something I think it's important from a marketing standpoint that you guys can be putting on social media. Like, so glad I get to collaborate with other agents in our company and we're figuring out how to win for our buyers. So all of that to say, when we start getting into the compensation things and all of that, I think we're going to have to change our script. The market is changing. This is coming down the pipeline anyway. The market is just making it happen to where buyer agents are going to have to get used to paying for our services. And I'll put it to you this way. I told my team last week, think about it. If you host a free event, you have 100 people RSVP. How many actually typically show up? If you charge them $1 or $5, how many do you think will show up? And it's that they feel like you're working together. They feel like you're owed, if that makes sense. And so I feel like if buyer agents if buyers felt like they were actually paying us, they would quit skipping agents so much. They would be like, this agent is working for me. But because it's out of sight, out of mind that they don't pay us, I think we are just another person. I mean, there's another agent out there that can do it. But if they were the ones that were actually paying us, I think the relationship would be completely different. I mean, because the expectations would be different. I think they have the same expectations now, but can you imagine if they knew that at the end of the day, at the closing table, they were going to be paying us? And I say that to say, if you guys have started noticing in this market, buyer agent commissions are getting reduced to next to nothing. But if your buyer agent paperwork says that you are due 2.4%, you need to have that conversation with your buyer that if you choose a house and the compensation is lower than this, as a part of my service fee, this is what I charge. And I know this is an incredibly uncomfortable conversation to have. I've been down this road. I have lost clients over it. I get it. But I'm not saying you do it today or tomorrow. I'm just saying I would get mentally prepared for going down this road. And I personally think it's going to be a good thing. So I know I'm on a soapbox about this, if you can't tell right now.
We're having some technical difficulties.
Okay, good, because I don't want a whole lot of commission conversation to talk about on there. But just to put it out to you guys, if y'all have been following Inman and what's going on, the Department of Justice is suing the National Association of Realtors for clear cooperation. So they want it to, it's not going to be too much longer before when you pull up Zillow, it's going to show if there's buyer agent compensation or not. This is going to be all public knowledge. So that I'm saying we're already going to be going down the path of if a buyer wants to work with a buyer agent, they're going to have to pay the buyer's agent. Because all this stuff has been in the works for the last 3 years, since 2019. This has all started. And I feel like this market is just making it happen sooner. So I'm trying to prepare my team, myself, my dialogue that, you know, if I'm working for you, this is the compensation that myself and my firm charge. If you choose, you know, most of the time, this is being offered by the listing broker. You know, I think the whole language needs to change. It's not the seller. The listing broker is paying the commission, not the seller. The same thing when you go to listing appointments. I tell sellers, this is my marketing fee. This is my fee to find you the best buyer. Now, if that means another agent is working with that buyer, great. I'm going to split my commission with them to this percentage. So I'm just saying I would start kind of getting in your brain how to change that conversation. Sellers don't want to hear right now, well, this is how much we have to pay the buyer's agent. Because what do sellers feel like? I don't need a buyer's agent. A buyer's going to come by my house. If I put my own, if I stand in the front yard for a sale sign, it's going to sell. So that's what I'm saying. I changed my verbiage to say, this is my marketing fee to find you the best buyer. And if that's with another agent, I'm going to work with them to make sure we get you the best scenario, the best situation. Because right now in this market, it's not all about money. It's about how long can they stay in their house after they close. It's about, you know, how long, you know, there's so many things that we're negotiating now that, you know, price is just a small piece of it these days. And I was just talking to the chamber was here and I said, you know, it's been so different in the past 3 years between how it was before COVID, during COVID, and now. So I think a lot of y'all that have been in the business for 5+ years can say it's started to get real transactional. I knew some of y'all and had met some of y'all, but we would go through an entire transaction without speaking. Everything was in email, everything was in text, never saw anybody at the closing table. It had become very transactional. And then COVID happened and it was kind of like, well, now we're only seeing each other virtual. Now everything really is through text and email. And now I feel like we're in a market where we have to work together. We have to talk to each other. I have to call even one of my competitors and say, hey, I saw you have this house, you went under contract. How many offers did you have? How many showings are you getting? Like, for us to be prepared, we are having to lean on each other. And I personally am here for it. I'm excited to see it kind of come back to us working together for the better of our clients. So that is one of the big things I would say is go ahead and start training your brain to prepare your buyers to pay your commission. And, you know, we've even talked about it a little bit on our team. We're starting to see offers come in where it's like, hey, the buyers are willing to pay all the seller's costs. What is the sellers here? They're paying their own buyer agent commission. You know what? That seller loves to see that because sellers are already a little, you know, feel over the fact they feel like they're paying somebody else's agent. So again, that's why I explain it. This is my marketing fee. I'm going to share it, but we got to change our brain and change our verbiage that the seller's not paying the buyer agent commission. The listing agent is. The listing agent is not offering this. Then this is what I and my firm charge. And I feel like by turning it into the listing agent, it takes the buyer from thinking, oh, greedy seller. They already think that way. Let's be real. So if it's like the listing agent is only offering this, and when you and I sat down and went through our buyer agency paperwork, which I can't stress enough is most important to do right out of the gate right now. When we sat down and went through that, remember how we discussed it, my fee was 2.4 or 2.5 or whatever you charge. And if the seller didn't cover it, or if the listing agent didn't cover it, see, my brain is still trying to go on that same road. If the listing agent didn't cover it, then you would be responsible for the difference. So this is where we're at. And I feel like it's going to be hard conversations. I'm not saying it's not, but I think a lot of times when buyers are like, thank you so much for finding me this house, I'm so excited we get to make an offer, and walking them through the process, they're already starting to see our value, because if they're working with an agent that's not good, they're losing out on every house, and they're getting frustrated and they're not being guided directly. So if they're working with a good agent and they're having a good experience, and they're going to see our value. Now that I said all of that, what are your thoughts, questions? We're going to get into more stuff in a second, like actual buyer consultation and contracts, but are y'all seeing any of that already?
Absolutely. I got one yesterday I called you about. I'm not going to go too in depth of the terms, but one of the terms on the offer was the buyer was willing to pay all seller expenses, and that was it. It was just one line, all seller expenses. And I'm like, okay, do you mean closing costs, or do you mean you're willing to pay the buyer's agency commission? Because based on the offer price and that, I mean, my calculations was that would almost be $17,000 that agent is saying that they're offering all expenses. So it came down to that agent didn't communicate properly to me that they did not mean that they were willing to pay commissions. But the way that they wrote it on that addendum that they had, it was really just so broad that I was sitting here like, man, if that's what they're doing, they've got a solid offer. That really changes the net sheet for the sellers. So I would really be interested to see how that plays going forward, if there are people that are willing to do that, because it will take your offer that you have at list price and really make a huge difference because you're willing to pay that commission. So.
Well, and again, I feel like that I can just mentally see a seller looking at $10,000 more because they're paying their buyer agent commission, or $10,000 more because they just offered $10,000 more. I feel like a seller mentally is going to go, oh, this feels better. This feels better that I'm not paying somebody else's agent the same numbers, but this feels better. So anyway, going back to buyer consultations, I again can't stress it enough. It's your segue to go ahead and get your buyer agency paperwork signed. Now that I've explained the process to you, and by doing that, we talk them through what is the difference between due diligence and earnest money. We talk them through, what to expect with the home inspection, if we're going to have a home inspection, and what those costs are associated. This is a great time to pull out the professional services disclosure and say, here's another resource that I am for you. All of these things you're allowed to have. Would you like me to schedule any of these? I highly recommend a survey. I highly recommend Radon. I highly, recommend this, that, and the other. And those are things that I'm sure y'all can all say, a buyer said, I never even thought about that. I never even thought about, this is a basement home. So I probably need to have a radon test just to make sure. Or there's, certain pockets of radon in certain areas of the county. So I feel like that's a good little guide where you're showing all the ways that you're helping, other than just showing them houses and opening doors. Because again, so many consumers think that once we put something under contract, our job is done. And we all know we really earn our money from contract to closing, keeping it together. And knowing rights. I mean, we got sellers trying to pull deals, in the middle of the transaction. We got sellers, doing crazy stuff. And so I think it's important. And that's what I say in my buyer consultation is I want to know what your expectations are. And I want to set expectations for you. So, that's when you're really going to learn from your buyers how hands-on they want to be. I'm a big believer in, I'm going to set them up on a search regardless. I'm going to shoot you emails every time something hits the market, but also I'm going to share my HomeSpotter app with you, because those are the ones that are scrolling Zillow at night and they're sending you listings that are not on the market anymore, or, sold 10 years ago or 3 counties over, and they didn't realize it. I'm trying to think. I think there was a TikTok about it. It was like, can we see this house? Oh, it's in Maryland. So I feel like if I give them access to the HomeSpotter app, it's that same scroll feature as what they're doing on Zillow. So I ask them, are you an app person? Yes, okay, I'm gonna give you my app. This is your direct access to MLS. So if you see anything else that's not on here, call me, because it's probably not gonna be a legit listing, probably not gonna be true. And then I also set them up on the email search. I'm like, do you want these every day as soon as something hits the market? Now, as an agent, I like for myself to be on these alerts to see them as soon as they hit, because you always want to be the one that calls them first, to say, hey, did you see this just hit the market? And then that way, I feel like you're covered both ways. That if something hits, they feel like you sent it to them, but they also have the option to scroll themselves and feel like they're exhausting all their own options, because I just feel like that's what they think they have to do right now. We go through the financing piece. I can't tell you how many buyers, I mean, y'all have had this conversation. They're like, oh, no, we don't want them to pull our credit. It's going to ding our credit. I'm like, soft hit, and, explain to them that it's not detrimental to their credit, but in order for us to know what loan program you qualify for and what we're technically going to be shopping by payment. We also have to get them out of the mindset of, I don't want to go for 400. Well, why not? Well, that's just I just can't imagine having a $400,000 house. Can you imagine having a $1,700 house payment? Well, yeah. Have you looked at the math? Do you know what kind of equity you have? Do you know what we're putting down? Do you know what your house payment's going to be? That's what we're shopping off of, how much you can afford per month, just like you do in a car dealership. So just changing their mindset too, because they have so many, in my opinion, preconceived notions.
They're afraid to reach out to the lender too. Sometimes it's best to say, can my lender reach out to you?
Always. Yeah. So I'm going to have one of my favorite people call you just so they can explain your options to you. Because I had one call in the other day and she said, well, we're just going to wait. I really want to buy right now, but we're going to wait because I haven't been at my job a certain amount of time. And I'm like, well, that may not make a difference. With some loan programs, all you have to have is your approval, like the letter saying that you're going to be employed. And she was like, really? She's like, I thought I had to be there for 12 months. I'm like, nope. I was like, this is why I'm going to have my lender call you so he can explain what he needs and figure out at least what your position is. When you say that, I mean, it just sounds like, okay, I do need to know that, because I'm not going to go shoe shopping without knowing what size I wear. So I need to know what my position is. And then you start talking to them about not only that, but when you are searching in different parts of the county, there's different programs that are available. So you just make it sound like it's so much more in depth than they are imagining. I just need to walk into a bank and get pre-qualified. And, obviously we're not writing a lot of USDA loans right now, but back when that was the thing, we needed to know exactly where you were shopping, because if you qualify for USDA, that was a game changer. If you didn't, we needed to know we had to go down a couple different paths. So I think just explaining their options as far as that goes. And then, we talk about time frame, obviously. And I know some of this sounds so boilerplate, but it's interesting when you get to have these conversations, again, what they were thinking versus what you're actually able to educate them on. For instance, we had a family looking to move from out of state, but they are unsure of the timing and they want to wait till school gets out. And to them, they're like, okay, so, we want to move in June. I'm like, we need to be looking now, April, May, you want to close in June. They're thinking we need to start looking in May. And I'm like, the way stuff is moving, if you want to move in June, we need to go know where we're going. Some sellers want to stay in their house for 60 or 90 days. You know what? That would be ideal if you want to move this summer. So let's start looking now. So really digging deeper, I think, than we've ever dug before is really important, because so many, I feel like buyers are running around like they're on fire. And I'm sure y'all are seeing, oh, this house just hit the market, I got to go see it. Oh, this one just hit the market, now let's go see it. And it's kind of like, let's talk about, remember when we had that conversation about what we're looking at? I want to sell you a house. Absolutely want to sell you a house. But I think by keeping them calm and managed, then they feel like, wow, this person is really working for me, not just unlocking a door.
I think understanding where they're coming from too can really help a lot. We've had a lot in New Jersey, New York, so it comes through lately, and the process is so polar from here to there. You're talking 60 days to close minimum in New York and New Jersey. We can close in 30 or less, and they don't understand that. Their lenders don't understand that. So you really have to tell them that if you haven't bought a house in North Carolina in the last 2 weeks, the process is different. And that's why this is important, and you set those expectations. Well,
and the consultation I have with a couple moving from South Carolina, I asked them, how was it when you bought your house? How are things done there? Because you can say non-refundable money. Non-refundable money, you don't get this money back for any reason or no reason at all. Amnesia as soon as they want to terminate. You're like, what do you mean? I thought I was going to get it back. I thought the inspection didn't came back. I'm like, that's 8 years ago in North Carolina that made a difference. And so I always ask them if they're coming from another area, how do you do things in your state? Because like you said, in New York, they go ahead and close and they have 60 days to move out. Like go in escrow, they don't, it's completely different. And so it's important to know you have a buyer coming from out of the area, what are they used to? Because they're going to compare everything you do to what they're used to. And if you, I would say, put everything in writing, obviously that you've explained it, but if you haven't had that conversation with them of what they think is going to happen, then they're going to constantly be over here just not understanding everything you're saying, because we are throwing so much at them. Let's be honest, especially if they're moved from another area. They're trying to figure out where they are in the world. They're trying to figure out schools. They're trying to figure out shopping and everything else. And those are the things they're focused on. And we're over here like, we need to schedule home inspection. We need to schedule this. So what other issues other than not being able to find houses are y'all seeing with buyers these days?
One of the things, another just relocation people that come into the state, they're looking at schools and they're asking us. And the biggest thing I like to tell people is, depending on what website you're looking at, most of them in North Carolina are rated on a 1 to 5 scale. We're a 1 to 10 state. So think that through, because they see that the school is rated as a 3 and they go into an instant panic attack thinking that it's a horrible school district. I'm like, look into it, read the reviews. Don't panic when you see a 3, because 3 out of 5 is not bad, in my opinion, when you're on a 1 to 5 scale. So I would throw that out there too, as just an FYI, so that way they know when they're searching.
The other thing that is vitally important is pull as much information as a buyer agent as you would as a listing agent. I can't tell you how many times we have had clients come in and they had never seen a copy of the covenants, had no idea how many pets they could have or couldn't have, had no idea about fencing, had no idea about pools, had no idea about septic tanks. Oh yeah, we had one the other day that flipped out and you're like, I told my agent I didn't want to be on a septic tank. And we're like, welcome, you're in Johnson County. Did y'all discuss that at all? Because, and sure enough, I mean, as a listing agent, I had to go through the ringer. And the buyer agent was like, was that on the paperwork somewhere? We're like, it's in the MLS. It's in the MLS. We uploaded the septic permit, like, welcome to the world. But it's, you know, if you let your buyer buy a house in a neighborhood and we had this happen, it was our own neighborhood, I had no idea, only allowed to have 1 dog. This person had two small dogs, didn't matter. Only allowed to have 1 dog. And luckily we provide the buyers with their covenants, plat, septic, ortho photos, everything that we can, whether the listing agent provides it or not, we still pull it. And come to find out, you know, we ended up being able to get a variance, but it was one of those things, like if you aren't paying attention to those things and educating your buyers, and you're going to be on the hook for it down the road. So it was, I can't tell you how long I went working with buyers and never pulled that stuff for them. Just assumed if the listing agent gave it to me, I'd pass it along, and now it's practice. Everybody gets this and you have to sign off on it, especially things like septic permits and surveys. We had a buyer get a survey on a new construction house. Their buyer's agent didn't come to the closing, and the attorney never reviewed the survey with them. Just they signed it at closing. I provided a copy of it. They had a 30-foot sign easement in their front yard and had no idea. And then they call mad a year later when they go to put a fence up and realize that they can't. They're mad at me and they're mad at the builder. I'm like, you literally paid for a survey. We sat at the closing table. You signed it. You just didn't read it. So make sure as a buyer's agent, you are covering your client on that behalf, because everybody is moving so fast right now. And I know it's hard, but I swear you can do it now or you can pay for it later, is my thought process on that.
Making them initial and date it while your doctor's signing everything. They never said that you didn't do it to them.
Yep.
I did that yesterday because everything moves so fast. They're in a hurry to see this house and they've got tunnel vision and not seeing it. But if they have to stop and say, okay, what am I signing now? It gives them. So I said it's everything.
And I know it sounds kind of foreign to think, oh my gosh, yes, well, we all have time to have a buyer consultation. But think of it this way, this, in my opinion, an ideal situation, you're working with a new buyer. I've always said, I'll show you one. I'll show you one because I want to make that rapport. If you call me on a house and you want to go see it, I'll meet you out there and I'll show you one without having to, you know, go through the buyer agency and go through this. And everybody has their own rules. So you do what works for you. And, you know, we're going to have the pre-qualification conversation, but I will show you one, even if you're not standing there with your pre-qualification letter, because I want to build that rapport and I want to work with you. And even if you're not pre-qualified, I want to get you pre-qualified so that we can work together when you are. So once I show you one, if we're not writing on that one, then my next step is, okay, here's what needs to happen next. Great meeting you. Can't wait to work with you. let's make a time, 30 minutes. I just need to sit down and have a buyer consultation with you so you know what to expect. Because when we get to this, if this would have been the house you're writing on today, you'd have been drinking from a fire hose and you would have been overwhelmed and possibly frustrated. And I don't want that for either one of us. So now that we've met, now that, you know, I'm so excited to work with you, let's sit down and let's go through what actually needs to happen. When they're sitting there in front of you, you've already shown them how you're going to be working for them. 9 times out of 10, it's not hard to just start this paperwork. Because you're, like I said, I would start with professional services disclosure. These are all the things I'm going to help you with. Here's all the listings that I've just shown you that are available or they're coming soon that we're going to set up a time to go see. Now, here's the paperwork that says, my job is to work for you. And if you read the buyer agency paperwork, I mean, it really says that we have a commitment to work for you. It is our commitment to find you the house that you want, to be and work in your best interest. And, you know, buyers haven't heard that for years. You know, so many buyers are so used to, I'll get a better deal if I call the listing agent. Well, they know that's not the truth right now. The listing agent doesn't want to talk to a buyer because there's 700 of them out there. So now they need to understand that having a buyer agent who's going to bat for them and fighting for them is more important than it's ever been. And I can't say enough, that's what y'all need to be putting on your social media instead of the agents out there like, wrote 10 offers, I'm exhausted, ... Don't put that out there.
Please
That's
don't.
scaring the buyers. That if they feel like, wow, somebody's over here winning offers for their client. Lori just won one for her buyer. You know what I mean? People are getting offers accepted. And, you know, that's what we need to be putting out there. And it's because I was diligent and I've been working with them for 3 months and knew what they wanted and stayed on top of things. That's what we need to be putting out there.
I would try and shy away, since we're on social media, shy away from saying I'm so busy too, because that kind of is saying you don't have time for anybody new, and you don't want to portray that. You can show that you're touring houses, show that you are busy, but don't say that you're busy. I think Blair posted something the other day that she was saying, I have all these buyers. Is that you? I need houses. No,
I think Lauren has posted a couple of those.
Somebody posted something like that. They were saying that they have all these buyers, but they have no houses. I'm not trying to get you as your listing agent. I just need your house to sell.
Right.
And I ended up getting a listing from
Was that you?
all of that. Yeah, it's from right on Friday.
That's awesome.
I had posted it once a week for a month. And she finally called me. I hadn't seen her in 20 years. We happened to be Facebook friends. And she was like, hey, I keep seeing your post. So we've been silently talking about it. And we just want to hear, do you think our house really would sell? And then her house is only 10 months old. So I said, well, go talk to a tax professional, make sure you're okay with that kind of stuff. And we're listening at Friday.
Well, and I think it's really great if you're specific in what you're posting. Like I need someone who is specifically, you know, I have a buyer who needs 3,000 square feet, 4 bedrooms, first floor master in this school district, in this location. If you or anyone you know has a home that they are considering selling, you know, have them reach out to me. So again, I wish I could, like, y'all mark my words, a year from now, buyers agents are going to be viewed very, very, very differently. I'm already seeing it, I feel like. So any other questions, needs y'all have with working with buyers right now? Again, other than listings, I know we're all getting creative. Several of my agents have had really good luck door knocking and nothing else, just getting to know people. I always say show up with a gift. If it's box cookies, if it's candy or something, it's harder for people to be ugly to you when you're giving them something. So anybody else having any?
I have one.
Yes.
I have someone that wants to buy some land. There is a sign on the land that says there is a gas line on it. No matter I look at whether it's deed, plat maps, or anything that I look at through history of this property, there's no recorded easement or anything that I can find on it. How do you find the information?
Is it a list?
Is it the Colonial Pipeline?
It's not listed on the market. The seller is selling it themselves. But there's plainly a sign in it.
Is it like the pole with the yellow round dot that I would go to the Colonial Pipeline website and see if it shows it going through
It
there.
does.
Okay.
It does, but there's nothing
Surveyors are human too. So, I mean, gosh knows, look at the one that missed the whole thing in Buffalo Creek over in Wendell. I mean, there was a whole entire power line going through.
no information on it at all. And the seller didn't disclose anything about it.
No.
But it's obviously
Right.
through
Well, and with the Colonial Pipeline, you can, put a driveway over it. You just have to know that whatever you put, if they ever come, you can't put a structure on it. If they ever come back and they need to dig that or work on the Colonial Pipeline, they're going to dig up whatever is there.
Was it, we just wanted to see what the standard easement was. Is it 30 feet? Is it 50 feet? I mean, I think 30, but
I would think
how do I
30.
get that information on it.
I would call surveyor and say, I've got this piece of property, and, just ask them, I'm seeing the pipeline on there. I can see it on the website, but it's not on the survey. I can give you a couple resources for our surveyors that we use.
And we do have all things land coming up next month where we can kind of deep dive into GIS and that as well.
Yeah, what's to look for on that. Okay.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
How would you, if you had a buyer, how would you approach this topic when you were talking about that they want to deal with seller and skip us out?
Mhm.
I had a buyer that contacted me. They're from Georgia. They wanted to go see this piece of property. And we scheduled a time, but they came in early and they went to the house itself. Now they said they want to deal with the seller and handle it with all themselves.
Buyer's agency agreement.
Mhm.
Is this a physical?
No. It's on the MLS. It's still on the MLS.
So, but you had a showing time appointment scheduled and they just went early and ended up meeting the sellers.
Met the people that was renting one house, but they looked in the windows of the other house because it was a piece of property with the two homes on it.
Oh,
And
gotcha.
then they called me and said, I'm sorry, we don't need your services anymore. And I said, okay,
Mhm.
how would you deal with something like that?
Well, it's hard if you've never met them. I will say, I can't say enough good things. I love the new Working with Real Estate Agents brochure. It's so less scary than the previous one. And I feel like if you, and again, we're supposed to get it signed every time we meet with somebody. So hopefully everybody's been doing that, but I can tell you I'm guilty of not doing it every time. But I feel like if I've at least got that signed, there's some type of loyalty. So even if you set up an appointment for them, you can send them in an email version of DocuSign, like, hey, I just make sure you understand how agency works and extend to work as a buyer's agent. And at least if they've signed that one piece of paper, I feel like they have a little bit more commitment. Just like I said, if you invite somebody and it's free, they feel like there's no obligation. If they have signed one piece of paper or if they have done anything with you, then there's a little bit of that obligation. So most of y'all should have the Working with Real Estate Agents link in your email signature. There's a link straight from the Real Estate Commission website. And then you can just, so great if it's an internet lead or you've only talked to them on the phone, so great speaking with you or chatting with you before we meet. This is not obligating you to me, but I'm supposed to give this to everybody that I call it our HEPA form of real estate. We give it to everybody we come in contact with. So if you would just, I want to make sure you understand buyer's agency, and then I'm excited to help you with this process. And then hopefully they feel tied to you regardless.
I use it more of a Mirandized statement, like, I want to read you your rights. You have the right to have representation. If you walked up to the selling agent directly, you have lost your representation. I can't help you. And you want somebody on your side, especially in this market, because their job is, the listing agent's job is to take the most money out of you, and anything you say or do can and will be used against you.
That's very good.
And putting it like that, people are like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to do that. And I say the same thing. I'm like, I have people that they don't want to bother me. Well, bother me. I'm a full-time agent. This is what I do. Bother me. But if you feel like you must go out and do open houses without me, you sign those open houses books as Timothy Neubauer. You don't put your name. You put my name. You put my email.
Yeah.
And memorize my name and my email, because if you go to an open house and you don't, that you say, well, I don't remember my agent's name, and you're not working with that agent.
Mhm.
So I want you to be on top of that. And I want you to remember who's representing you. Because at the end of the day, you need me. And I'm going to be the expert that gets you the house that you need. So you really want to try and flip your script on that. Don't say, well, this is just something that the real estate commission has me sign for you. No, this is your right. You have the right to representation. You want that right. You don't want to waive that right. You walk into a police station, do you waive your right to an attorney? Not unless you're crazy. So let's do it that way.
I do like that. No, I had a situation yesterday with some clients who are working with, and they wanted to look at a piece of land, and they want to get a listing agent out there because obviously he's more familiar with the property. And they're like, well, you don't have to come. We'll just ask him some questions. Like, no, I really want to be there because, and they literally argued with me on it probably for 2 days. And then finally she was like, you know what, my husband's an engineer, but neither one of us are real estate agents. So we really would prefer if you, and I explained, I was like, I know the questions to ask. I know if he's telling you something that is false. I know what more information to gather from our conversation. But if I'm not there, I'm not privy to any of that, and everything's going to be secondhand information. So again, I think this market is making buyers understand they need to work with us. If not, I will say I'm not saying we weren't on time, but I always try to get early to showings because buyers love to do that. They love to get there early and scope out the house. And next thing you know, they're standing on the front porch.
This was awful big.
Oh,
It happens. It
Oh.
happens. Don't take it apart though.
Yeah,
'Cause
those are just
some people just, they don't want to work with you. They think that they know better.
Yeah.
They sold a house in 1982
Yep.
by themselves and they know better. They don't understand our market. They don't understand what's happening. And all the changes that have happened just in the last 30 days.
Mhm.
I mean, just how we're seeing the different shifts in due diligence and the terms of offers and how important the terms are more than the offer price 9 times out of 10. And what I'm finding too as a listing agent is these buyers agents are sending me blind offers. They're not calling me and saying, what are you looking for in closing costs? Or what are you looking for the closing date? What kind of due diligence are we expecting? Do you
Didn't call me and let me know that you're sending it. What are you doing? So don't be the buyers agents.
I have a question
Oh,
go
in the
ahead.
chat. What was the website for Colonial Pipeline again?
Oh, I don't have that right in front of me, but we can
get that at the end.
Yeah, we'll Google that. That's what I typically just Google it, but there is a website just for the Colonial Pipeline that shows you the maps and where it's at. Because it does run here to Texas. So you had a question?
Yeah, how do you feel about sight unseen offers? If your buyers are like insistent on put an offer.
If they're insistent, you want to be that agent. I hate to say it, but I don't love them. I think you need to educate them on the pros and cons of what that may be. We just had one on one of our listings. Is she in here? Yes, on one of our listings this past week. And same thing, buyers went to the seller's house, heard you were selling, will you sell? Luckily, she'd already met with them, had her listing presentation, consultation, everything. So they were going to sign with her. So they called and said, hey, we've got this person wants the house. We're going to work it out. Wrote up an offer and everything. And then they just showed up one day and the sellers let them in and they just ripped the house apart for cosmetic issues and things like that to the tune of like $60,000. They're like, we're taking our contract away. That's a whole lot of paint for $60,000. And so I think it's a double-edged sword because you don't want to miss out on what could be the perfect property. But I also feel like you gotta have a thick skin buyer to be okay with that. And I think if you know you're dealing with somebody who really can't afford to lose that due diligence money, if there is something major wrong, really, doesn't have the money to fix something that may be broken, I think it's a very big education conversation that needs to happen to say, I want you to have this house just as bad as you do, but my job is also to protect you. And if we get in here and there's structural damage or this is wrong or this is wrong, are you going to be okay moving forward? And if they say no, then that's our answer. Because again, and I'll say, I'll write up whatever you want me to. But you also hired me to be your coach and to be your advocate. And that's what I'm doing. If it's a new construction house that's 10 months old, probably not a big deal. But if it's a 10, 15, 20-year-old house that you just have no idea, there's not a lot of pictures and things like that, I don't know that I would be. And I hate to say it, but I feel like so many of the agents on that write sight unseen offers are a lot more abrasive throughout the but they're more abrasive. Like it's kind of like they're mad when they get in and the paint's not perfect and things like that. I'm like, you literally wrote an offer on a house that you never see, and now you're mad at me.
It's all exterior.
Yeah. And so
I always like to prep my buyers on that. Like, how bad do you want the house? And is there what would be a deal breaker that would make you walk away from it? Because I'm going to prep you for the worst case scenario. there's a possibility you could walk in there and you could see the floors are going from one way to the other. There could be active termites, there could be roof leaks, there could be plumbing leaks. We have no idea. 'Cause 9 times out of 10, they're also doing no representation on everything. So for you to go inside on scene, you have to love the location and the property and don't care what it looks like.
Mhm.
And if they're okay with that, then I'm okay with it.
Mhm.
But if they're hesitant, I'm gonna be hesitant.
I usually do verbal, just like verbal coaching, but also a list in writing that goes, that they've seen, that they know and realize that they are writing a silencing offer and what it could be in the end,
Mhm.
and just put it in writing.
Yeah.
So that if it comes back.
There are sight unseen addendums out there too.
Yeah, we were asked to do one, I've never heard.
I've never seen that
before.
before. I haven't either.
Yeah, we don't even have a sight unseen.
I have one somewhere I can share with you guys.
Okay.
I'll get that to you after. I've seen them a lot in the past. That they really just, it's an acknowledgement of that you haven't seen the house and that your due diligence is not refundable. So it doesn't protect
Mhm.
the buyer. Now, I have seen more addendums going around lately that are trying to protect the buyer, but when they land in my email as a listing agent, I just kind of chuckle. And I'm like, well, your offer just went to the bottom of the pile because although your price may have been good, now you have all of these additional terms that aren't favorable to the seller. So I just want to think about that as you're submitting these crazy addendums that you guys are having drawn up by attorneys.
Yeah, because I think, in that situation, not that it goes to the bottom of the pile, but now it just made the listing agent and the seller feel less secure. If the buyer doesn't feel like they're completely understanding that they are buying a house sight unseen, which again, to me is kind of, I can't imagine doing it, but yeah. So let's get into some of the buyer agency agreement. So here, I'm gonna stand on this side too, so I'm not my back to anyone. So I know a lot of us have been through this form. One of the biggest things is, knowing, I've had this happen before. We represent a buyer and they wanted to buy something in their LLC or their corporation. You need to make sure that you have the correct people signing this, because the closing attorney is going to catch that and they're going to want to see who the managing member is and all that. And then it never fails it, especially if you're dealing with a buyer who buys a lot of properties and have corporations. They're all huffy that they have to provide all this documentation now. So if you're dealing with somebody who's an investor or, they know they're buying something in a trust or an LLC, just have that conversation up front. Like, so who's actually going to be signing? Who do I need to make sure that we're talking to in that situation? So the buyer is not a party to a buyer representation agreement with any other real estate firm. Buyer has received a copy of the working with real estate agents disclosure and has reviewed it with firm. The buyer further represents that they have disclosed to the firm any information about the properties of the type described in paragraph 1, and the buyer has visited any open house or that the buyer has been shown any by any other real estate firm. So this is another great pre-qualification question that I have when a buyer calls in and they want to see a house and I'm going, oh, have you looked at many houses? Instead of going, are you already working with a real estate agent? Which is what we all say. I say, have you looked at many houses? Because they're like, yes, I've seen 7. Oh, great. So you have an agent that showed you this? And I just called the listing agent. And then you can kind of start having, well, why aren't you working with a buyer's agent who's specifically working for you? And then I just want to find houses on my own, or well, how's that been working out? You've looked at 7.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, obviously not quite as hurt as I just said it, but so you want to make this stuff as vague as possible.
Yes.
Now, I'm also a big fan and have used this before. And when we are on that first showing, saying, hey, I can write this agreement just for this property. If you don't know that you want to work with me and you're not quite ready to hire me, we can write this agreement just for this property. And then once we get to know each other, we'll do a buyer consultation. Then you know that we want to work together. We can update this to be as vague as we want it to be. But if you're working with a buyer for the first time, I would make it as vague as possible. General location: Wake, Johnson, Harnett, Wayne, Sampson, Cumberland counties.
I put North Carolina.
Well, you will go all around North Carolina.
Yes, I don't do that if you're not willing to work those areas, but I have gotten stinged in the past where I had a very close family friend. I sold their house on the premise that I was going to be the buyer's agent. They ended up buying out in the mountains, which I was willing to represent them in, but they had a cousin who just got the real estate license and they ended up going with the cousin. And she referenced that my buyer's agency, so she knew that I was representing them. She knew I had a buyer's agency agreement and she had them send her buyer's agency agreement that said Wake and Johnston. So I kind of stepped on that myself, but from now on, everything Timothy does is North Carolina.
Yeah.
So be vague.
Surrounding areas.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
in
that-
surrounding areas.
That's
The out-
vague. That's a little bit,
Yeah,
that could be. What if you say in surrounding
Okay.
areas is Wake and Johnston, but they end up in Wayne County?
Just surrounding
Yeah.
areas.
Maybe whatever, it's surrounding.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you could argue that it's not touching, it's not surrounding.
So the buyer intends to acquire real property of the type described in paragraph by employing firm as the buyer's exclusive agent. Buyer agrees to conduct all negotiations for such property through firm and to refer to firm all inquiries received in any form from any other real estate firms, prospective sellers, or other source during the time this agreement is in effect. This is a great time to have that FISBO question, that conversation, that open house conversation where, hey, if you're gonna go look at open houses, please always call me. And this is where, again, you're proving your value. This is where you're saying, I am working for you. I'm not too busy. Call me. Call me if you have a question. Call me if you want to see something. I don't want you running around and trying to do this on your own. This is why we're filling this out, because you're hiring me.
And also a good thing too is lean on the people around you. Tell them, if I am busy, I have a
Right.
team. Even if you're not on a team, you have a team of agents around you that you could find somebody to open a door at the very worst case scenario. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's awesome. So we're not bugging you if you are in another appointment. Like you can still make it happen.
Or if they know you're out of town, that's when people go rogue all the time. They still on Facebook. That's how I used to never post when I was out of town, because I was out of town. And next thing you know, you're like, why was such and such? I saw you at the beach. So I'm like, well, that's how this works. Firm acknowledges receipt of a non-refundable retainer fee and amount of blank. Has anybody in here ever charged a retainer fee? I knew you were gonna say yes.
Susan. So I had a buyer who backed out of 3 contracts. And I told her, I was like, for me to write another contract for you, I know that you're serious and you want to buy a house, but I told her, I was just like, my broker in charge is not going to let me put another house under contract for you if we don't do a retainer. And I had a number in the back of my head. I was like, I'm going to say 5,000. Because I was really hoping that she would say no and just walk away from me. But I panicked in the moment. I said 25, and she pulled out her checkbook and wrote me a check for $2,500. I ended up selling her a $600,000 house 7 months later, but it was.
Again, she was
Process.
tied to you. She was financially linked to you. So then she felt like she had to go through with it.
Yes.
You know what I mean? I wonder if you'd have done that on the second contract, or she would have went through with the third, because she felt financially.
She was linked though. She lost out on almost $50,000 in due diligence between those 3 houses. So that was just a special lady.
She had more money.
Yes. And she ended up buying her first house that we went contract on, and she walked away for $40,000 more too.
I knew, yep, that's exactly what I was thinking about.
How does that even work? Like, how would that logistically work if we started to put?
I would love for us to all start charging retainer fees, because I feel like it would change how we work, even if it was only $500.
Is it paid directly to you?
It is paid directly to you, and it says it shall be credited or you're going to keep it. So you can try and say that it's just a payment to you directly, or you can have it where you credit it back at closing if they buy a house.
But it says a firm.
Yeah, I was about to
So
say,
it's
I'm gonna
gotta
have
be
to.
written the firm.
Mhm.
The way I've done it in the past.
We can cheat because we have our own firms. If you
Yeah.
have your own firm, then you kind of cheat that way and then just pay it back to
It's
EXP.
the agreement with the firm of EXP, so the firm in this agreement is EXP.
Right, so I will,
Well, let's double check with that and get back to you guys.
Vic's really gonna pull her eyelashes out. What about this?
Well, it's a good question, because I feel like with buyers paying our commission, that's going to come into play. I feel like that's going to be a very big thing for our future.
I remember when transaction fees first came out, I was like, no seller is ever gonna agree to a transaction fee. They don't bat an eye at it now.
Nope.
So I think we're gonna end up on the same thing with buyer agents or buyers. And I think, especially with gas costs the way they are and things like that, again, y'all write today down, mark dollars a year from now, it's gonna be different.
Before you move into the next line, I wanted to survey real quick. Who in this room is not EXP? Is everyone EXP? Okay. So this next one, EXP.
Yeah, you
It-
need to make sure this is exactly how they want it.
Yes. So in the past, with my previous firms, they had told us that we could put on here, so buyer for resale, new construction land, you could put different numbers for that stuff. They won't let us do that anymore. It needs to be a single percentage, and you cannot add verbiage. This is a contract. You can only add numbers.
They do allow verbiage.
It depends upon who's checking your.
I can tell you, so the broker in charge,
I honestly would say not to do, because I've got flagged back, because I used to do 2.4 resale, 2.5 new construction, 3% unrepresented, or whatever MLS says. I got kicked back for putting whatever MLS states.
Yes.
Everything else is fine, and I have not been kicked back. I'm not gonna look, because that's gonna come back.
yeah, but if it's what MLS states, so this agreement is between you and the buyer. So
Yeah.
what if you get something that's outside? So you're shifting from before we were saying the sellers are paying. We're not doing that anymore. The buyer is paying our commission.
Buyer agrees that firm's fee for service shall be in the amount of. And so that's when I start on the conversation of, a lot of the listing agent is offering compensation for me to bring you to the house and represent you on one of their listings. However, with the way the market has changed, not all listing agents are doing that anymore. So my fee is 2.4% for me to represent you, or 2.5, whatever it is. Now, I always say, there is a chance this may become negotiable in the future. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, depending on what property you choose. Because, if they're offering 3%, you don't want to have to give them 0.6 back. But there are, I don't have that conversation. But anyway, that's, in my opinion, how you could start explaining that. And then just say, we're going to have a conversation depending on which property you choose as to what that's going to be. But that way you are covered and they understand that they owe that to you. Now, again,
You're not putting it in until after you find the property?
now put 2.4.
Yeah. I do 3% because I'd rather not have to go back and do a agreement or the compensation form where you have to tell them you're getting paid more versus I can reduce it without having to sign.
That's a
form.
good point.
You can't do up to. Yeah. Yeah.
Basically just lose whatever percent of the purchase.
Again, this comes down to who is reviewing your paperwork. But at the end of the day, EXP's policy is that you can't do up to, and that you're not supposed to add verbiage.
I do love the thought of just putting a blanket 3% in there and then having the conversation with the buyer that it may be less, but this is what we typically charge. And I'll be honest with you, like my husband does commercial, there's never that conversation. It's always a substantially higher percentage, and it's this. That's it. There's no fluctuation. There's no coming down. He charges this. Because their industry is not dependent on what somebody else is offering. Yes. So if he's going to represent somebody, he charges 6%, 5%, whatever it is, and it's just a blanket conversation. And again, we all know that we're working harder for less these days, and I think buyers are going to have to start getting on that same page. But
right there,
So if you put 3% and it's a 2.5.
you can reduce it. You can reduce.
The buyer is responsible for that 0.5% additional too, if you want to push it.
if
Yes.
you want to push it, yes, you can ask them to pay it. So remember, you signed that you pay me 3%. And again, it's up to you. This is your business. You can come down if you want to, but now you've set that precedent. And here's the thing: buyers agents don't know. Buyers typically don't know. They don't know how we get paid. They don't know that we get, all they know is that somebody pays us and it's not them. So that's what I'm saying. We're going to have to start changing the language, because within the next couple of years, I feel like with this lawsuit, it's going to be out there anyway. And so, we're going to have to start getting paid by our buyers, by ourselves.
We're going to start having those conversations.
And again, I hate to say it, but the market is helping us in that way.
Okay.
Go ahead.
If within blank amount of days after expiration of the agreement protection period, buyers enter into a contract to acquire property. So that's basically saying if you showed them a house or a sent them a house and they go under contract on that house that would have been within this buyer's agency agreement, they have X amount of days. I typically do 180 days. I don't think that there's a set amount. I've seen people do 30 days. I've seen people do 7 days. 180 seems to be just my boilerplate for things. So kind of have fun with that. Pick a date. Firm duties. April was talking about this.
Yeah. So again, this is another way to prove your value. These are all the things that I'm responsible for doing. And, a lot of times I use examples, I use stories. I'm sure you've heard horror stories about people moving into a neighborhood and they didn't know this. They didn't know they couldn't have a pool. They didn't know they couldn't do that. Use those stories to make buyers go, oh, it is good she's looking at this, because I hadn't thought that I needed to know what the impervious surface was in my neighborhood if I wanted to put a pool one day. You know, so you stories that are kind of telling them what could go wrong by saying, but I'm gonna make sure this doesn't happen for you.
Worst case scenario, but wish for the best.
Yes. I know we're going through kind of quickly, but if we're skipping something or if I have any questions after on specific.
I like going over the buyer's duties too, because I feel like they need to know that they have to be cooperative in this. Same thing when you're doing a listing agreement,
Mhm.
kind of let them know that they need to be involved.
Not only that, but let's talk about this. You know, fair housing does not want to see any love letters anymore. So there's a reason they put this in the contract. And I would say, I know you want to write a love letter to the seller. I know you've seen on social media that this is working. I'll be honest with you, what I typically tell my buyers is if you want to write a love letter to the seller, great. I will present it after we realize we've been accepted, and we'll let the seller know how much you absolutely love the house. And it does help with the relationship moving forward, I feel like. But you know, typically, and I've had sellers turn down offers just because they had love letters. So
I always ask, do you want to see them or do you want me to just put in the trash?
it's really important to talk about these buyer duties like it is seller duties on a listing agreement. You know, conducting all communications through the firm, just like your people. If they'd had a buyer agency agreement and they just walked up on that property and started talking to the sellers, hey, remember here it said, you're gonna use me. The reason you hired me to be your liaison. And I always use the verbiage of, you want a license going against another license. And like you said, anything you say to them will be held against you or used against you. You need all communication command needs to be through me to make sure that you're being protected all the way around.
You walk.
I have a buyer who we're under agreement already, but this is for sure we're putting the house, and she called someone at Remax the other day because she saw that they have a new development coming. And the Remax lady immediately told her, oh, you're working with an agent, just take her number and I'll call her kind of thing. And she goes, you might have rang people in, they're out calling real estate agents.
Mm-hmm.
And luckily she was sweet about it and, you know, took it upon herself, and not everybody would then.
Oh, no, absolutely not. And again, this is where
We got to fix that when we get back to that.
you're good. This is where, when you get to that paragraph, you have that conversation. Like, I know you're going to be tempted to call on a sign. You think I'm too busy or whatever. Screenshot me a picture of the sign and I'll call. I can find any information for you that you need, but use me. And again, I feel like if they feel like they're paying you already, they're tied to you.
Yep.
And they don't feel, I mean, then I hate to say it, but their attitude's going to change. But, well, I'm paying you.
Yep. Life is different when they're paying.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, again, so again, with the other professional advice, this is where you get to show your value. I love giving them a sample offer to purchase and contract, because they get those 16, 15 just down there like,
Yeah.
I'm like, don't worry, I'm gonna walk you through all of it. You can print out one that's a sample across it. Questions and answers on home inspection, there's a brochure in there, and then the professional services disclosure election form. Like I said, I love walking them through, like, I have resources for all this, don't feel overwhelmed. I'm gonna do all of this for you at a prior stage.
See, I really like your take on that, though, because I feel like a lot of people don't know how to present the professional services. They just say, I have the sample in here for you. They don't go over the fact that it's you being the expert for that.
Mhm.
That's something that I've never been taught before. So I love that.
Well, that's part of our value is we have experience and we know people that do a good job. They're not going to get, you know, somebody's not going to screw them over, for lack of a better word. And we have quality people that are local that we know will give them, you know, the best service. So this is, I can't believe this is actually still in here, but used to back in the day, the home warranty companies would pay you $75 if you referred them. So I always use this as a place to say, technically I could charge $75 if I order a home warranty for you, but I don't charge that. I'm just gonna put an A right. And they just think you gave them something. But we used to get $75 checks in our boxes back in the day. So we just had this come up this week. Real estate brokers prohibited about disclosing the price for other materials if they are working with a competing person. So I have had that before, where I've had, and one of my agents was saying it this morning, they were writing an offer up for 2 different buyers on the same property. So I've always disclosed it, and you're supposed to disclose it. And I say, I'm going to be completely neutral. I'm already writing an offer on this property. Would you like to have another agent in my office write for you? Or, you know, if that were to happen, again, I think that's also solidifying how important we are, because it's like, wow, there could be so many buyers on one house, especially in this market. So I could still write an offer and I don't have to worry about competing with you. We have the option and you're talking them through what happens for multiple offers.
Additional provisions.
Additional provisions, is this where? sorry,
Yes.
That's where we put the transaction fee, is an additional provision that we charge a $250 transaction fee.
I charge $350.
Well, you do you.
Do you ever get feedback on that?
Very rarely.
I've had a lot of problems with VA loans lately.
How do you present that to your buyer? I say that where is my commission is my finder's fee on a agent. My commission on a listing is my marketing fee. This transaction fee is for me and my firm holding on to your information for the next 3 years. And if you call me for anything in the next 3 years, you need your offer for your taxes, or you're doing this, or you're doing that, you're refining it, so you need to know your title insurance was. We pay for that cloud storage and we hold on to all this information for you. That's a part of the transaction that has nothing to do with marketing. 9 times out of 10, they're fine with it. Like it'll go on the closing statement. You don't pay this now, it'll come out at closing. So again, it's kind of outside out of mind. It's not typically a hill I'm willing to die on. So
Yeah.
then if they are arguing with me about it, I'm like, okay, it's fine. My firm charges it, so I'll just pay it out of my commission. And then 9 times out of 10, no, we don't want you to have to do that.
You could buffer the lower percentage of
The
commission
Yeah.
into that.
Mhm.
Now,
So,
with that, though, I will warn you, VA loans not allowed for a transaction fee. Reworded it where it's a document retention fee and it's no longer a transaction fee. So for VA people, I changed my wording a little bit and then you don't have a problem. It is, it's a document retention fee.
Document retention.
Tiffany is all about figuring out those.
No, it's
A legal loophole.
it's just, you want to make sure you're doing it right.
April, with this listing that I have put on Friday, we did the, standard 6% with the transaction fee. And she made a comment that her husband knows somebody who's listing house for less right now.
Mhm.
And instead of me dropping that percentage, I said, well, what if I get rid of the transaction fee? And it saved me $1,200, but to her, it looked like she's getting a little bit of discount.
It was a
So
gift.
I kind of use that
Yeah.
as a
Of this part talking about dual agency, and this is where you kind of can get to use the verbiage of why you want to work with a buyer's agent and you don't want to go to the listing agent. I don't love dual agency if it's on one of my listings, and so that when we talk through, hey, if it's on one of my listings, we may end up doing designated dual agency, because at the end of the day, it's my job to make sure you have the best representation. And again, I feel like if you are giving this spiel and it's always coming from a place of in your best interest, I'm advocating for you, and they truly do feel like you're working for them.
Can you go back up just for a moment, Lane? Just so you guys are aware, if you're doing designated dual agency, you do the top buyer on D, and then they need initial E.
Mhm.
If they're doing exclusive representation, you're not doing dual agency, that one is D on the second. Now, if you do exclusive representation, you cannot show them EXP houses. So just make sure you're aware of that.
And so a lot of times I get in that conversation, especially people that were back in the day, bought back in the day when dual agency was a disaster. And when I say that, I mean, people literally got to the closing table and that's when they realized that the same agent was on their both sides. Like they didn't know until they got there. It was like back then it was done so much and nobody talked about it. So now my spiel is, if you want to, when I explain agency is, I would rather be your coach than your referee. So if you want to make an offer on one of my listings, I'm going to have somebody else in my company represent you. But if if they're like, I don't want any dual agency, you have to explain the difference in the company. Okay, well, that means that we're taking ourselves from being able to look at about 800 people's listings in the market. And there are still some who are absolutely will not do dual agency, and it doesn't matter how many times you explain it. But dual agency means I can't show you any EXP listings at all. And then when they realize how much they're missing out on, typically you just got to explain the difference between whether it's my listing or it's the company's listing.
I'm curious to hear how you do the dual agency compensation. I know we probably do it differently.
I don't typically change my dual agency compensation.
So this is saying if the firm acts as a dual agent, including designated, the total fee the firm expects to receive is. So that's hard because we don't know what the listing agent listed the house at.
Mhm.
So I put in there is just 10%. So it could be 6%, it could be 10%. I don't know. What do you guys normally put?
Isn't there any way you could say, I did this one time because I knew how much the person charged. It wasn't on their firm. Like, I just knew this person and I knew what they charged.
Yeah, I mean, if you do the rate, yeah.
That on there, and then I put, and this was before we had experience, so I haven't done it since, but I put the number about, her seller agreement or something like that.
Mhm.
And then in addition to, like if it was 2.4% plus 2.4%
I'm gonna add-
as advertising.
I'm gonna add that
It's
to,
verbiage, but
yeah.
I don't, EXP mentioned it,
Yeah.
so there's gotta be some.
You've got to be very careful about adding verbiage because then you're not filling in the blank, you're changing the contract and we're not allowed to do that. So I'm gonna put that on the top of my list of something to ask of what we're supposed to be putting there, if we're supposed to be reaching out to the listing agents. But I think a safe rule of thumb,
This at our buyer consultations, we don't even know.
yeah, we don't even know. So 6 to 10%.
Yeah, I'll ask, find out what we typically. do.
Now, if you're doing land
It's
higher.
expensive.
Yes.
Yes.
Or if the house, I have a scale. So if the price of the house is lower, my listing percentage is higher.
So you read that differently than I read it. I've always read it as that the buyer, do we change our compensation if I am a dual agent and I am representing both sides? Will the commission be reduced?
Let's double check that.
Yeah, because I've always read it that way. I always say I don't change, the commission rate doesn't change regardless if I'm on both sides or not, because the workload is still the same.
But the firm is taking more. So that's where
We'll double check
I
that.
interpret it differently.
Joe in chat said 6% resale and new construction, 10% unimproved land.
But that, again, that's
vary.
verbiage. Yeah.
Mhm.
Photographs and video. I like, again, Mirandizing people. Ring doorbell cameras, nanny cams. You are in a house. There is a chance that they could be recording. So if they start having a conversation about what they want to offer, how much money they have in their bank account, stop. Let's step outside.
Yeah, we're not having driveway conversations anymore.
Yeah.
That's for sure, especially with everybody having everything.
Because I look around, I'm just like, well, there's a camera there.
I have no idea how many don't. My sellers called me the other day and they're like, oh, they're complaining about this and they're complaining my car's parked right together. And I was like, so what are you doing? He's like, well, they're on my front porch. I can't help it. I was like, so I make sure we have the wire fraud conversation. That's still happening. Yeah, same thing about risks associated with wire fraud. I don't think there's anything else really. Anything that we did not cover? Questions?
We have a question on chat,
Okay.
going back to the lawsuit. Can you tell us where to find out more about the Department of Justice lawsuit?
You can look, it's on the Department of Justice website. Inman is doing a really good job. Inman News is doing a really good job of covering it, although they can be a little biased. But the most recent article I found came off of Inman. So it's all about clear cooperation is what they're going after. They feel like the consumer is in the dark because we have information that they are not privy to. So it was supposed to be a settlement, but they just pulled out of that settlement last year. So it's still going on.
A part of that was we're asking for it to be transparent, right? So in MLS, it'll say the listing percentage. So you'll be able to look and see what people are listing for. And that's when it's going to get really messy if that goes through.
That's fine. In my opinion, we're gonna counteract it in our own way and just start changing the mindset. If we all start doing it, we're gonna change the market.
Yeah, and then not a conversation saying that you need to list a certain percentage or like that. We're just saying the buyer is truly responsible for paying us.
I would change the conversation to that. And buyers are getting offers accepted in this market.
California buyers pay for their.
Right.
Anything out west, there always pays some fee.
A lot of states are moving that way, like I said, and I think our market is giving us that
Always the last.
segue. They're giving us that segue, and I think that between that and this, that's why to me it's important to go ahead and start having that conversation. And I think it's going to make buyers more loyal.
I would like to see them add another box on due diligence that just like big, bold, red
It's coming.
let's talk about that a little bit. Is anybody else seeing earnest money come back again?
No.
I would start, there are starting to be issues throughout the triangle where people are putting 50 and 60, $100,000 in due diligence down, and then the seller does not realize they don't have clear title. And then the seller has spent $7.
I did have one recently where my listing got $200,000 in due diligence. And that was, I told them that means you need to bring $30,000 to the closing table because that's not gonna cover your mortgage. So do not spend all that money.
Mhm.
I told them, I was like, I have your net sheet. That's more than what we want to do. Even advised, why don't we counter that for less?
Mhm.
I feel like it's a little crazy. If they're like, no, let's take it.
So I would go ahead and make sure you're having very strong conversations with the sellers to make sure they understand, because in the back of their mind, they're like, oh, well, everything's gonna go through, it'll just be da-da-da. I mean, I had one last year and it was just $1,000. I mean, so can we go to dinner on this? And I'm like, do you have $1,000 in your savings account? And they're like, I was like, no, because you're gonna have to bring it at some point in time, you gotta give it back. So for some reason, something doesn't happen, this is gonna have to come from somewhere. But I've already had 2 agents tell me situations where the sellers weren't even aware that they had a title issue. But now we close and they've spent the majority of the due diligence money.
My thing is, I always tell people, and this is a scary thing, and it's rare, y'all know it's rare, but in the one instance that it happens, it could be your person. So I always tell people, don't get excited. My $90,000 due diligence check that was received on listing one time, I had it dropped off at the husband. He's like, I've never had a check this big before. And I said, don't get excited and go paying off your truck.
Right.
Boat, like, chill out, put it in your account. So you look at a nice big number for a little while before you.
Yes, that 90 doesn't
Anything.
exist. Everything
I
past it
said,
does.
because let me tell you what could happen. If the house was to burn down tomorrow,
Mhm.
would you have that money?
Right.
Or would you have to wait for an insurance company?
That's a
to
good
do
point.
everything And a long drawn out process, when meantime, you got this mad person over here trying to find a house, they're innocent, you can't produce a house and you can't produce the
That's a good thought process about the house burning down.
You have to have a house.
It doesn't
If
have to
somebody
be-
was to die, if somebody was to die. Oh,
I had that done
into
Yep.
a
I had a
whole
seller
big mess.
One right now,
So
we just passed away.
leave it alone. It's tough. Leave it alone
Mm.
until I send you a message and say it's officially recorded. It's your.
That's the only reason I think we're gonna see earnest money making a little bit of a comeback. Because I know for myself as a listing agent, I've got one. I mean, the due diligence money is high. I'm like, I mean, the price, if they're gonna walk away from $30,000, then, you know, but my seller's already packed up the house, done this now, and I've got 2.5 weeks in limbo before closing. I kind of wish we'd gotten, I mean, I almost would have rather seen less due diligence and the same equal amount.
Or like equal amounts.
Yes, just so, because, I mean, that was the whole point of having that earnest money coming up after due diligence, so that sellers now feel like, okay, now we have some recourse to back out at the last minute.
Now, I will say a lot of that is going to play into also the expectations that the listing agents are setting
Mhm.
for the sellers, because I've walked in and made offers and they've laughed at $30,000 in due diligence because it's a carry agent and they don't know Johnson County. I'm like, well, Southern Four Oaks doesn't get you $40,000 in due diligence.
Right.
But that's just not a thing, especially a lower price point. But they've set the expectation of that's what they're going to get. So now our offer is good. I think that kind of has to be that everybody has to make mentally, and you have to set the expectation for everybody involved. That's what we're doing. So I love this.
Mhm. I think it's more protection, I think, and holds the buyer's feet to the fire to actually get done what they needed to have done, and the seller left holding back was the whole point of it to begin with.
April, could you talk just for a moment on, so you have a buyer who has wrote a couple of offers, they're in buyer agency with said agent A. They get frustrated, start conversation with said agent B. And once that agent right offer, yet they think they're not an agency. But yet, if they write offer, B, I'm gonna offer, I write it, we get accepted. How that now that buyer's up to
Mhm. So I would, if I know a buyer has written an offer with somebody else, my question is, did you sign buyer agency? 9 times out of 10, they have no idea. And so then I say, okay, well, if they wrote an offer for you, they should have had you sign. I need you to call that agent and get me a termination by our agency agreement. I mean, I'm over here writing the offer, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But I can't submit this until you terminate with them. Otherwise, you're gonna be due 2 commissions.
Okay.
Again, put it on them. And if they're certain that they don't want to work with them, then they won't have any problems with them for a termination. Now, again, I have to explain that termination typically, they're unilateral, everybody has to agree, but I also don't think we really hold them.
No, so that's the one thing that really sucks. So you're in a buyer's agency agreement, somebody decides to walk away. The only way that you have recourse on them is taking them to court. And how many of us want to sue our clients?
Right.
I have threatened to sue clients that have walked away, but I would, that scares me. I wouldn't want to muddy that water.
Publicity.
Right.
Yeah.
But that it's scary because it is a lot of money, and they don't realize how hard we're working, and they don't appreciate it. So that's you really got to kind of show them how hard you are working, and that you are the expert. There's some people who just aren't your people, and I can't stress this enough. When you encounter somebody that is not your person, walk away. Don't hold them to the fire and do everything you can to get them to like you. If your personalities don't match, find them somebody that does match with their personality. No, I can't tell you how many times I've worked with people that are just like, really should have just let that go because it cost me way more stress than it should have. So don't put yourself in that situation. And we don't want to sue our clients.
No.
It's having to fire clients.
Yeah.
Yes, it's hard.
Heartbeat.
Mhm.
And I feel like that gives you a little bit of exclusivity too. When you are able to turn a business, people want you more. So they're like, oh wait, you're only taking on referrals now. I'm lucky to be that referral.
Mhm. Any other questions? Thoughts, wishes, hopes, dreams?
What are y'all seeing? Like, are we, because I know that y'all, there are some offers that are getting taken because of terms. I mean, is everybody only seeing over asking really high DD? Like, what is going on?
Depends on the area.
It depends on the area, it depends on the property. I mean, we were sitting at a thing yesterday and Blair was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna go to a house of buyer and there's only one offer on the property. Chanel in our group just posted last week that there's several buyers who missed an opportunity because she had a house, had no offers on it. The buyers never called and asked her, and they put in their feedback, buyers didn't want to get into a multiple offer situation. And the agents never called and asked, they just assumed. So I think there's a lot of assumptions going on right now. And so that's, I feel like communication is very important. Just like Timothy said, we'll get offers in our email and it's like,
You didn't even
who
call
are
me.
you? Why, where's the qualification letter? Where's still trying to piece together for them. And if they would have called me, I'd walk them through what needed to happen.
I'm going to step on the soapbox for a moment. If you are writing offers, please complete your offer.
For real.
I want your offer to be 100% complete. Do not send me page 14 not filled out. You guys, we have to initial every bottom of every page for that thing. So if you have to change something, everybody has to initial the change. At which point that's a counter.
Mhm.
So you just made it. You did a verbal offer you just sent because it's incomplete. But my notes in the bottom, offer incomplete. I hate that I have to do that. And I hate that I have to go back to these agents who say they've been in the business for 30 plus years. They're sending complete offers.
Mhm.
I can't stand the one question. Your buyer, they don't put the listing, they put information in there first, and they just.
We're way up.
Get every single piece of a listed agent's information.
Right there in MLS sheet.
On an MLS sheet, if it's not an MLS sheet, www.ncrc.gov, and you can find their agent number. There's been times when I found it in like MLS, but it was.
That
No excuse or
wants to know the difference between due diligence and earnest money.
Okay. So we had a question just over the chat, the difference in due diligence and earnest money. So the way I like to explain to buyers is this is what we are paying the seller to take the property off the market, to not sell it to anybody else. What is it worth? Is it worth to you? And what is it going to be worth to the seller? to take this property off and say, we're gonna hold it to work for you. Because this isn't closing the property, this isn't selling the property, this, you're buying time from the seller. Earnest money, I feel like, and again, not everybody's using it right now, but to me, this is kind of like that end game. Okay, we're really gonna go through with it. Once we're gonna do our due diligence and make sure that we know as to whether or not we're gonna buy this property. Everything checks out, guess what? You're gonna get our earnest money too, to say we are moving forward, and you have a lot of money that you're holding of ours right now to ensure that we do. So earnest money, is held in a trust account with the attorney. We at EXP do not hold earnest money. Thank goodness that's not a thing anymore. We used to run escrow checks. I mean, it was, I don't know why.
That's
it was always,
unnecessary evil.
it was so
But
necessary.
if you wanted to see earnest money again, and we know due diligence, people are just desperate out there doing one day, do you still need 1 day for due diligence?
No, if it's like that, then I don't see a need for earnest. Well, here's the
It's
thing.
kind of.
Now they have 30 days to back out. If they're willing to walk away from $20,000, you know what I mean? I would love to think, I think it's just $1,000 more. It would just be that little, God, I don't want to lose any more money. Shouldn't I just go through with it? I feel like it's, I don't know. That's just my personal opinion. I'd like to see that, because I'm looking at what I have now and I'm thinking, gosh, my sellers are relocating, moving 4 kids out of the house. And there's 2.5 weeks that I feel like unprotected now. In hindsight, I wish I would have asked, because at first I had due diligence and earnest money, and I asked them to double the due diligence. So when they did that, they took away the earnest money. And I went back to them and they weren't willing to do both. And I was like, it's the same amount of money, but hindsight, I almost wish, just because.
In 2 different
Yeah.
segments of the transaction.
Yeah.
Do you prefer additional earnest money or additional?
Additional. No, initial. I can't tell you how many people have
Typically,
split out on addition.
yeah, we've always done additional with our team, so.
A, I hate keeping up the date. B,
Yes.
I want it to be up to the buyer's agent to get that money back if they need it, not me. And C, I've had people who were supposed to deliver additional earnest money that never did. And you're another 5 days in, and so at this point, we're 7 days out. We've already spent all this time and, more time off the market.
And
So
again, there's no recourse for that if they
Mhm.
didn't deliver it.
Yeah.
So I understand both sides of that. It's hard.
Any other questions?
Touch on sellers accepting after buyer goes under contract, and then somebody behind the scenes sends the seller a really nice offer, because we have to put in all offers as listed agents, right?
Yeah.
No matter when it comes
Yeah.
in, and then.
I feel like you're looking at me over here.
Sellers say,
I'm waiting on a response too.
I want to cancel this contract because this over here was a whole lot better. Seller can't cancel.
Well,
Oh.
You gotta wait for the.
so here's,
Back offers.
They gave us some bullcrap excuse, but it wasn't that.
so we have had that happen before. 2 things to know in that situation. You are going to have to get litigation involved. The good news is, what we were planning to do in that instance, she got it worked out before we had to, but we were going to have our attorney send in a letter saying that we were going to be pursuing damages to the buyer, as well as our commission, as well as, what was that? Anyway, but that would essentially have tied the house up, because it would have been in litigation. So it was kind of a double-edged sword for the seller. They did do it. We decided to pursue it. We knew we'd win. And I've had this happen before. I had a seller try to cancel a contract, and the buyer agent literally sent every spreadsheet where it's going to cost them $31,000 if they backed out, because they had totaled everything up, including their moving expenses, including this. And that's for a judge to decide whether or not the buyer's entitled to it, not me, you, or our attorneys. So once I presented that to the seller obviously changed her mind and wasn't willing to lose that money.
Well,
But in
that
this
goes from
situation,
small claims court to not small claims
Yeah.
court. That's-
but in this situation, we told them that we would be pursuing it, and so they changed their mind. But I've had both happen. I've had sellers back out of contracts and end up paying $5,000 or something to get out. We've had a seller back out of one of our contracts, and what we learned the hard way is, if the listing agent does not pursue their commission, you're technically not entitled to your commission. But the listing agent is the one offering the compensation, not the seller.
Just had another question. Someone was asking about escalation clauses. Do you want to push that question to next week?
Yes, just as, I don't know. And I don't think, anyway, yeah.
That'll be the list. So listing part 2 is gonna be next week. So we're gonna go from buyers to listings. So next week, same time, 11 o'clock. I will be going over listing paperwork, what you guys need to do how to go over listing, exclusive right to sell agreement. We'll kind of run through that line by line, and I will talk about escalation agreements because I see a lot of them. And we see ones that are in favor of the listing, and some that are in favor of the buyers. And I typically the ones that are from the buyers are not the best. We see where they want to protect money. My favorite one, which I have a copy of anybody, is just saying that you acknowledge that the house may not appraise. You acknowledge that you have the difference, and that you acknowledge that the seller makes no representations that they're going to go down on price. That's the one I like. A lot of the ones I'm seeing though are saying if the house doesn't appraise, that you are agreeing to bring the house down in price, and I don't like that.
No, escalations are when somebody says, I will pay up to X amount over your top
I
offer
thought you were thinking that.
in addition to this.
Yeah.
I don't like those. They use it a lot in your northern states. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of buyers come in with those. And I've seen a couple, and 9 times out of 10 my sellers don't like them. They're like, just tell me how much you want to pay for this house. I feel like it's kind of an under game.
It really is a bidding war too.
Mhm.
So with that, you have to provide proof.
Right.
And the offers actually belong to the buyers, and without the buyer's permission, you cannot disclose an offer.
Right. So I think escalation clauses are great for other states that don't have the same rules that we do. And there are people down here trying to use them, and I'm not a big fan. And most of my sellers haven't been big fans. They're like, this was like a game.
My client just got it in Kentucky. He's like, we don't even understand it. Explain it to us. And I did. So we weren't even favor this year.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was thinking appraisal.
You're thinking of pricing.
It's hot up here. Yes. Any additional?
All right, everybody good? Anything?
Thank you.
Whole world?
Well, thank you, everybody. And